Springboks taking on England this weekend, folks. Nations Championship. It's such a shame this game wasn't played like last year. England were on a heck of a run, and then the Six Nations happened, and they've kind of fallen off a bit. Both the Springboks and England had pretty good years last year. But yeah, England's Six Nations campaign was not the best. So they are massive underdogs against South Africa. I'll get to the predictions in a second. But we'll go through the squads and whatnot first. There are some pretty interesting picks from both sides, some stats which might be relevant to this game. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on whether you can see an upset or is it South Africa cruising at Ellis Park. For the Boks, their squad has been out for basically like 5 or 6 days now. Rassie went with the really early squad naming. Steve Borthwick has followed suit with that kind of thing in the past, but not this time. He left his squad naming until the kind of more traditional time, did Steve Borthwick. So for the Boks, Ox, Marks, and Dutoy, that's a big old scrum. You feel like that's going to be a weapon for South Africa, especially with Eben back in the second row. They've got some big bodies in that Springbok type 5. Ruanoki is there as well. So they will certainly be looking to dominate at scrum time. That kind of goes without saying at this point with this Boks team. Their scrum is on another level from everybody else. England, if they can get parity, avoid scrum penalties, will be massively putting themselves in a better position than if they're getting demolished at scrum time. Kolisi, Dutoy, and Visa. That is basically, I think, the first choice Springbok back row in recent years. Peter Steph's work rate around the park doesn't seem to be slowing down, despite the injuries that he picks up and despite his, he's aging, but man, he just still keeps going. He's like the Energizer Bunny. Be interested to see how many minutes Sia plays in this one. Van Staden usually replaces him relatively early on in the second half, and he is on the bench. And then Jasper Wiese, goodness me, the guy with his direct carries and busting tackles is an absolute handful. But you've also got Cameron Honeycomb on the bench. So you've got some power on the bench to bring off as well. I hope Honeycomb gets a decent crack because he's still very early on in his Springboks career. He looks to have bags of potential. You've already got Wiese who you know can do it. The only thing that Rassie's ever had to say about Jasper Wiese, which is maybe in a bit of negative light, is occasionally the decision-making with the discipline stuff, But apart from that, when he's got his discipline right, he is a heck of a player. Against the Barbars, he busted like 6 tackles or something nuts. So, yeah, Wiese is there. He's going to get some big old direct carries, especially kickoffs. They like him catching the ball, taking it straight up the guts. He's not going to be swerving, stepping. It is into the contact he goes, but I do hope Cameron Honeycomb gets, 30, 35 minutes. I think he'll benefit from playing a team like England in a game like this, at a kind of high-pressure environment. Williams and Libbok, the 19 combo, pretty exciting. Libbok's back from Japan. Grant Williams, lightning quick, so it's a very kind of attacking-minded 19 combo. I like the idea, especially as the game wears on and we get some kind of tired bodies, that these guys are both able to find some space. Mani's Mani's able to unlock the back line. I feel like maybe better than the other two. I know Sasha's out injured and Hondre's just finished the season with the Bulls, but when Mani is on fire, his ability to just find the space with those kicks of his, get that ripper of a pass going, he is sublime when he's on form. Like when he's off, he can be off. He's one of those players, can run a little bit hot and cold. Goal kicking, likewise, can run a bit hot and cold. You got Cheslin Colby who can take over the goal kicking if needs be, but I hope, for Mani's sake, that he has a good game because he's, as I said, a really special player when he gets going. Midfield of D'Alende and Creel, very, very stable. And then Kurtley Arons, Cheslin Colby, and Damien Willemse. Willemse and Colby bringing up 50 caps, so big congrats to both those lads. They have been ever present in Rassie's Springboks since he took over all those years ago. Was it 2018? So, yeah, big achievement for both of those guys. I like Damien there at fullback as well because it gives them certainly a bit of versatility in the back line. Second playmaking option at fullback. Bench is not quite so experienced. The likes of Jan Hendrik Wessels, Zachary Porthen, Gerhard Stennekamp. Less caps among the front rowers, so we'll see what kind of minutes these guys get. Usually they pull the trigger pretty early on the front row for South Africa. Van Staden, like I mentioned, likely replaces Sia. Honeycomb, like I said, I want to get some good minutes into him. Reinach, the veteran. Andre Esterhuizen, does he come out on the flank or does he go into the back line? Maybe it depends on injuries or how the game is looking. And then Kanan Moody, who had a bit of a mixed end of the season in terms of his URC stuff, but is likewise versatile covering the midfield and outside backs. So I'll be curious to see what position he comes in on as well. England, as I said, the Six Nations campaign wasn't the best. They have had a few kind of tinkering changes throughout that campaign, like George Ford started the campaign for England, but they kind of fell out of favour as results didn't go their way. Well, they've picked a new 9-10 combo with Jack Van Portfleet and Finn Smith, which is leading me to believe that Steve is going to take a step back, maybe to more kicking. Okay, they're already a pretty high kicking team. England, certainly in recent years since Steve took over, they've been the highest kicking team in world rugby. That's not to say they don't play attacking rugby. Like, they get tarred with this brush of they only kick, they don't attack. Their attacking numbers have generally been very good as well. They get good advantage line carries, they bust tackles, they get clean breaks and whatnot. Initially, the first year or so, not as much, but it's gotten progressively better. But they have pulled back a bit from the kicking in the Six Nations campaign. It didn't go that well. And then Van Portfleet's there, who loves a box kick. So I would imagine Jack Van Portfleet is there to put some aerial balls up into the, altitude air at Ellis Park and see if they can cause the South African backline some problems. So he starts at 9. Finn Smith, who's not the biggest guy, but he's got the heart of a lion in terms of his defence, might be called upon to make some big defensive plays, but also get the backline humming. He's at 10. Atkinson and Freeman. Freeman's call at 13 is also an interesting one because I think since the Six Nations, he's basically played only on the wing for Northampton. He's been scoring tries for days, but Steve puts him back in the midfield, so that's a kind of a controversial call, but he was certainly very good in the Six Nations in terms of his ability to get the go-forward ball, the busted tackles and whatnot. So we'll see if he can do that in the midfield for England. Caden Murley and Fei Waboso on the wings, and then George Furbank at fullback. You might have expected to see Freddie Stewart at fullback in a game like this at altitude with the high balls, but Furbank, I think, overall, more complete game. Certainly he's a great playmaker, very elusive ball carrier. He's got a decent kick on him and whatnot. I'm not sure if Freddie Stewart's had a bit of an injury niggle as well, but I think Furbank overall is he had such a long injury layoff from England for a while, but him being back in England colours, I think is certainly a bit of good news. Gens, George and Hayes in the front row. As I said, they just need to get parity at scrum time. Set piece needs to be good. England's line-out, I think, has generally been pretty solid, but they need to get the scrum set piece going. There's obviously no Itoje. Remember, he's not touring. He's having a break after a long period of rugby, so it means you got Alex Coles and George Martin in. George Martin's a bit of a like that kind of hard-hitting mongrel player, which I think you probably need up against the big South African pack. Trying to get that dominant collisions or prevent the Springboks getting dominant collisions will be a big call on him. And then Ollie Chesham, Tom Curry, and Ben Earl are the 3 back rowers. So Chesham a bit of extra height, kind of lock loose forward hybrid player, bit of extra bulk. Ben Earl will certainly get through a heap of carries, and Tom Curry is genuinely one of the better dominant tacklers in world rugby. So might be called upon to do a bit of work if the Springboks dominate the possession, but we'll see. Cowan Dickey, Obano, and Pocket Vajor as your front row replacements. There's still big potential in the Pocket Vajor in terms of his ability going forward as a prop, but he'll be tested here against the Boks. But whether he's scrummaging against the starters or the replacements will be interesting, depending on when both coaches pull the trigger on the replacements. Charlie Ewels, Guy Pepper, and Henry Pollock. So 3 forwards on the bench for England. Henry Pollock gets so much stick from some South African fans on social media. Me as a Kiwi, like, we genuinely like our celebrities or sports stars or whatever to be a bit kind of like, to be a bit under the radar, to be a bit low key. So he doesn't fit the mold. Like, he's very, he's young and can be a bit brash and, can come across as a bit arrogant. So he's not the kind of naturally, like, his boisterous personality doesn't fit well for the New Zealand mindset. So often when I see Henry Pollock doing that kind of stuff that he does, I personally think he's a bit of a twit because it just doesn't fit with my mold of what the guys are supposed to do. But I can take myself out of that mindset enough to see that, having a big personality in the game is certainly not a bad thing, and he attracts a heap of attention. But the fact that he gets so much abuse on social media actually makes me want to start rooting for him. So I hope he has a really good game. Like, when Northampton won the final of the Premiership, he was getting abuse from people. It was just bizarre. So yeah, Russie spoke really well about him in the press conference as well. I thought that was very classy from Russie to say that, he's probably a good team player and his teammates like him, and what everyone else thinks is kind of irrelevant. But there we go. He's on the bench. Alex Mitchell and Marcus Smith, the other two back replacements. Maybe it's surprising to see Mitchell not starting, but I think he played on the bench for Northampton in their last couple of games. I think he's still coming back from injury, so maybe kind of makes sense. Some stats for you. Well, the Boks have already played one game thus far, so we can read a little bit into it. It was against the Barbars, so not a full-on test. It was a pretty experienced Barbars team, but they were put to the sword by the Boks. The concerns for the Boks from that game will be the amount of missed tackles and the amount of line breaks conceded, but first game of the season in a kind of exhibition-ish match with a few really young guys and that side, some new combinations, it wasn't a big shock to see those kind of things. Those are the kind of things that you iron out throughout the season. They've got a big scrum. They'll be looking to use that, obviously, in 2025. Interestingly, the one stat which stood out for me for the Boks was the amount of turnovers conceded. Like, despite everything else they did, some games they just dropped heaps of ball. And then sometimes it's games that they won comfortably. So you got to wonder, man, if they dropped less ball, what could they have done? It could have been even worse for some of their opponents. So be interesting to see what the balance is like in terms of the Boks when they do sling the ball around, whether they can retain it or whether it's still very much kind of on the edge, which does lead to the odd error. For England, in the Six Nations, it obviously wasn't their happiest time. They kicked, as I said, a bit less than the previous year. Still the most of the Six Nations teams. They still kicked more than 30 times a game, but that was down from like 35 the year before. But generally, high kicking game has worked for Steve Borthwick. They didn't win as many turnovers as they would have liked. And when you look at a guy like Jack Willis playing over in France, it's an absolute turnover machine, so they could certainly use a guy like him. And the tackle percentage was certainly low. Their line-out was fine, but yeah, they'll need to up the defensive numbers, look to try and pilfer some ball if they can. But yeah, you can see how many kicks coming in this game, depending on how much possession they get. 35, 40 kicks at altitude. We'll see. They don't have a good record against the Boks in recent years, England. They have only won one of their last 4 matches. That was in 2021, and that was at Twickenham. So we don't have any matches in South Africa among the last 5. They did win over in South Africa, was it 2018, when Rassie had just taken over and Eddie had a bit of a bad campaign in the Six Nations as well. They came down and won the 3rd test after the series was lost when Rassie kind of changed up the whole team. So it has been a few years, 2018, since that last win from England over in South Africa. They are underdogs for this one. The Boks are favourites massively. 14 points with the bookies, 19 points with the Rugby Forecast algorithm. So the Boks are supposed to do this one in a canter, hence me wearing the England gear, because it is underdog for the preview, winner for the review. But man, it wasn't that long ago that we saw a match at Ellis Park between the Boks, and it was the Wallabies, where the Boks were undeniable favourites, and we saw a massive upset. So it seems very unlikely, but that's why we watch sports, right? To see the drama, to see how it unfolds. It is on at Joburg, 5:40 kickoff. I've seen that they've adjusted the ticket prices. They got dynamic ticket pricing going on in South Africa at the moment. So the game was apparently really highly priced, and there were heaps. I even had a look at Ticketex, I think it was Ticketex website or Ticketmaster, one of those sites, to see all the empty seats, and there were heaps. But since then, they have apparently slashed the ticket prices by sometimes more than half. Could even be like almost like 66% off kind of thing. They're a third of the price because they want to sell out those last few seats. The last few, there was a lot, so maybe now it is last few, but you feel pretty burned if you bought the tickets initially. I don't know. Maybe I just need to get used to dynamic pricing, but I'm not used to that for sports. Imagine sitting next to someone who paid a third of what you paid for the same kind of seat. I don't know. Just doesn't sit that well. But anyway, maybe it's just modern economics. I don't know. It is on at 5:40, as I said. It's the middle of the night for me in New Zealand, so I'll probably have to watch it a bit delayed. James Dolman is the New Zealand connection. He is the ref. Fingers crossed he has a good game. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts. Do you think England, with their kind of poor form this year, struggle over in South Africa, or can you see the Boks first test of the season not quite being at 100% despite the experienced lineup? Subscribe to the channel. There's a Super Brew pool, by the way, for the Nations Championship if you want to join up. It's all free. Give us your predictions for the games this weekend. Take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.